All right, good morning. So many of you may have had your phone out this morning and saw the push alert just before we went on air that said, we're going to be diving into Measure A. Well, here you go. This is what we have been teasing. Yeah, true to our words here. Glad you went ahead and clicked on that push alert. Again, reminder for those of you that have friends who have not been watching, download the CBS 8 app either on your phone or your TV. We really are trying to kind of spread the way in which we are able to bring you the news. It's not so much more about TV. We are using a number of different platforms. So again, YouTube, Jack's been pulling a bunch of our shows, portions of our shows, and putting that up on YouTube as well too. But download that CBS 8 app. Tell your friends to go ahead and do that so that you get all of these breakdowns like we're going to do here with Measure A, which many of you may be aware of right now, but there are likely some that don't know about this yet. Now, if you go ahead and you look at your ballot, you'll see the gubernatorial race, but you'll also see Measure A, which is just a little bit more local. Yeah,
it's the final thing. Of course, you have your governor, you have lieutenant governor, attorney general, all of the state positions. Then you have your local positions. Yeah, and right there at the end,
48th district, Congress.
Which for some maybe of you, it's when maybe your brain is fried from looking through your pamphlet and learning about all of these different candidates and all that. Maybe that's one where it's like, okay, maybe I just need to check it off or whatever. Vote for or against. Well, if you don't want to do all that reading, the best thing about this show is oftentimes we can do it for you. We can explain everything here for you. So, Measure A, it is the only one. It's the only measure that we're seeing here on the local ballots. Of course, this is going to be on the current ballots that are going to be due June 2nd. Chris, we've already seen a campaign kind of kick off here. Over the weekend, we saw it happen. Why don't you explain that campaign? Why don't you explain kind of what we're going to dive into here today?
Yeah, so Measure A. This is essentially really dealing with an issue in housing in a way that, again, I think for people, they may think, all right, well, this isn't going to impact me necessarily because I may not have a home that I own that is sitting, quote, empty, right? But this will likely have an impact on you, especially because this is a way that the city is trying to generate tax revenue. And as we know, the city is currently in the midst of a huge budget deficit. So the campaign for Measure A ramped up over the weekend with a rally in the neighborhood of Golden Hill, where they went ahead and canvassed that neighborhood. Measure A, also known as the empty homes tax, is the only measure on San Diego's June ballot. Supporters, including Councilmember Sean Elo Rivera, who you saw there in the canvassing of Golden Hill, says that it would target corporations and investors that leave homes empty during the housing crisis by taxing those vacant properties. Elo Rivera claims the measure could open up thousands of homes and generate millions for city services.
5,100 homes are sitting empty in this city. They're sitting empty for the majority of the year, and they're people's second, third, fourth, fifth homes. These are people who live in other states primarily. This tax would impact less than 1% of San Diegans and benefit all of us.
Now, those against the measure say it will add to our rising cost of living with no specific plan for spending the actual money. So look, Jack, this has been, I can even go back to when we were talking about regulating Airbnbs, which, I mean, this is, I feel like I'm sort of aging myself here, but this would have been like 2018. This has been like right when I got here, when we did not have the sort of the Airbnb program that we do now, where, you need to get a license, certain amount of homes. There was this huge contingent that was obviously for a number of different regulations and a vast amount of regulations on homes that can be put out for Airbnb because they felt like you're taking homes off the market. But then also they sort of created, and when I use this term, I don't mean to try to put water on the fire of the argument. I'm not trying, but they really did create sort of this boogeyman idea of there are corporations or foreign investors who are owning these homes at large and are leaving them empty, therefore taking them away from you. And that was a big part of the argument, that by putting in these regulations, again, talking about Airbnbs, that you are essentially limiting these corporations' reach because, you can only have 2-3 of these homes. You needed to have a San Diego address to get a license and so forth. And so here we are again now with Measure A, with a revenue generator, and you're hearing sort of, again, those same arguments of these are corporations, these are foreign investors that own these homes at large, and that's who it's going to impact, not the mom and pop person who's lived here for 40 years and has that extra home that sits vacant for X amount of months to trigger said tax. So this is something that was passed 8-1 by the San Diego City Council to go ahead and put this in front of the voters. Again, voters will still ultimately have to decide. Estimates on net revenue of this range from about $9.2 million to $21.4 million just in the first year of implementation. They believe there are 5,100 properties that could be eligible for this tax. Again, would go to the general revenue here, Jack. So this is the empty homes tax, but that may be misleading, right?
Yeah, it is misleading, and there was a lawsuit that actually sought to clear that up. So when you hear empty homes tax, that is simply a name that has stuck in terms of the vernacular in which you see it talked about around here. The actual name, the name in which you're going to see on your ballot is non-primary homes tax.
Correct.
And the reason why that's the case is because oftentimes, empty homes has a clear negative.
That connotation. Yeah.
It's a connotation, which is that these houses are just open. They are empty, and it's just filling up space, which oftentimes it may not exactly be the case. A lot of it has to do with if it's a vacation home, if it's a rental, not things that are always vacant, but do perhaps maybe have a tendency to be vacant at certain times. So there's a threshold, but it's like it's a rounding up from 0.5 to 1. If it's empty half of the year, that makes it seem like it's empty all of the year, and that was something that they sought to avoid here. So let's get into the actual text. Short text. We're going to read it in its entirety before we go into some of the more detailed notes that we have surrounding the context of it, what we might be seeing, comparisons to other things throughout the country, the arguments for and against it. So let's go right into the text. I'll start. The vacant homes tax would be levied annually on January 1st of each year. The tax would first be collected on January 1st, 2027. The tax would be a flat rate of $8,000 for each home in 2027. In 2028, the tax would be a flat rate of $10,000. Additionally, all homes that are under corporate ownership would be subject to an additional $4,000 charge in 2027. In 2028, all homes under corporate ownership would be subject to an additional $5,000 charge. For each year after 2028, the tax rates would be adjusted annually based on increases documented in the Consumer Price Index. So when we talk about those estimates on fiscal revenue, net revenue in that first year, you can expect that to increase the second year from those rates, because you see a clear jump from $8,000 to $10,000 on the flat rate, $4,000 to $5,000 on the corporate rate, and then, of course, based off of inflation, you see it go up. So that's just the first year estimate that you're seeing.
I think it was interesting, and again, I'll just be quick with this note, that this was a flat rate. I mean, oftentimes you see a lot of conversations surrounding tax rates being based on a home's either value at purchase, which is a big part of the way that California does their property taxes in terms of the state level. But this is a flat rate, meaning that there's a home that could be valued at $3 million versus a home that's valued at $1.5 million, but they're going to be taxed the same amount.
Yeah.
Granted, they fall under the same purview of whether it be, someone who's not a corporation, et cetera. But assuming that's all the same, the home value doesn't seem to matter much here, Jack.
Yeah, it is just property.
Right.
It is units specific here, which, like you mentioned, it is interesting here. There's some exemptions, though, and so there are some ways to get around it. Essentially, I think a good way to look at it is, what are some habits that they want to incentivize so that you can avoid using this tax? So, of course, there are some that are that are something that is unforeseen. If it's been 2 years after a natural disaster or a non-negligent catastrophic event that makes the unit uninhabitable. Of course, we've seen flooding here, fires. You have stuff like that, so they take that into account. When the homeowner is using the residential unit as their principal residence, when the unit is under lease to a tenant, when the owner is experiencing financial hardship following the death of a prior owner or a person related to the owner who used the unit as their primary residence. Again, we're quoting from the text here. When the unit is used as the primary residence for an owner's family member and the amount of rent paid is less than the owner's expenses. 2 years after the residential unit is first granted granted a certificate of occupancy, when the most recent resident of a unit is in a medical or care facility, and when the owner or owner's family member who most recently occupied the unit is temporarily relocated due to military service. So the moral here is that if you want to be exempt, it is either we're going to understand if there are circumstances that are completely out of your control, whether that is a medical emergency, whether that's a natural disaster, whether that's something to do with military service. But in those cases, they're saying it is a use it or lose it type of instance.
Yeah.
You know, if you are filling the property, if you are consistently having an occupant in there, you can avoid this tax. You can avoid this levy, this duty.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think for a lot of folks who rent out their homes, their second homes, I should say, their second properties, I think for a lot of them, they were nervous about something like this because anybody who owns multiple pieces of property, you know, they obviously can do a number of different things with it, whether it be Airbnb. You have people who have homes that are sitting empty because they're being renovated with the intent to lease and so forth like that. So again, those are the exemptions. So if you're someone who rents out a second piece of property to a long-term tenant, again, you will be exempt in this scenario.
I have a landlord
Right.
and all that. My landlord would be exempt
Right.
from this, even though they do own multiple properties here. So, Chris, obviously this is something that is we're talking about a housing crisis. You mentioned the Airbnb stuff from about 8 or so years ago. This is an issue that has not only increased here in San Diego since then, but it has become a national conversation at the mass scale, and we're seeing this is not an original idea. We've seen it being done in other places. Why don't you tell me about that and perhaps the success rate? What are we learning from some of these previous experiments?
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice there are a number of cities here within the state of California that I'm about to list off who have all been dealing with this idea. Now, we've mentioned corporations here, but also foreign nationals. There's long been a strategy used by investors that are in foreign nationals where they will buy pieces of property outright in cash. There are condos in downtown San Diego that have been bought outright in cash that are sitting empty because those individuals are just watching it appreciate in value. They'll offload it and sell it at another time, but it's literally like they're using it as a stock, an investment. They're not living in the property, so to speak, and that's something that this is trying to cut down on. Now, areas where we've seen that happen are places where property values are really high. Think about San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and yes, even Washington, D.C. That has been an issue, and that's where those cities have put in a vacancy tax to try to either curb that activity or raise money off of it. So that has been where we have seen that happen before. Now, 7 vacancy tax proposals have been put up in various California jurisdictions. 4 have been approved, 3 have failed. Those 4, again, that have been approved, 3 have failed. Now, the measure most similar to Measure A was the one that was done in San Francisco. This was 4 years ago, and collection has been halted ever since. That's because the San Francisco Superior Court ruled in 24 that the measure violated both the U.S. Constitution and the state's Ellis Act. Now, concerns revolve around the Fifth Amendment's takings clause, which states that the government can't force a property owner to give up personal property without compensation. San Diego's proposal is a little different, so it targets vacant homes, while San Francisco measure actually targets apartment complexes.
Yeah, and it's a low threshold. I think it's only there's a very small threshold, if I'm understanding this correctly. I don't have the exact numbers on me, so forgive me, but it's based off of the amount of units that are vacant in these individual apartment complexes. I also do want to do an important note because we mentioned 3 California cities. However, in the state, 4 proposals have been approved. I want to be clear on that. San Francisco had 2. The one that we're talking about right now is the second one. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. And yeah, that is where we get into one of the major concerns that we're going to see about this because especially nowadays, because if anyone's paying attention to like the past week of news, and if you paid attention to Prop 50, just because voters approve of something on a ballot does not mean it's a slam dunk. You can see it get overturned for a number of reasons. A lot of these proposals, whether that's here on the local level or whether it's on the state level, like you saw with Prop 50 in California, like you saw with the most recent redistricting effort in Virginia, they do not need constitutional review before they go on the ballot. You can challenge it to your state Supreme Court. You can challenge it to wherever you want to, but that's not necessary for it. It doesn't need to pass a bar for it to go on the ballot. All it needs is the vote. And as we saw here, it was the San Diego City Council that voted in an 8-1 vote to put this on the ballot. So that's the question that we're seeing here. And this is a question that's being raised by some major opponents for it, is because we saw an effort like this happen, and it got overturned in the San Francisco Superior Court. Is this doomed to the same fate? That's a question that's going to have to be answered. Of course, legal challenges are going to be
They almost seem inevitable.
They're going to be completely inevitable. So even if this does get passed, who knows when we're actually going to start seeing taxes collected? Like we mentioned, the measure that we saw in San Francisco, that was passed in 2022. That lawsuit effectively halted it in 2024.
So there was an injunction that was filed.
And so they're currently in the process of an appeal. This has not yet gone to the state Supreme Court, or not yet issued a ruling on it. I'm not entirely sure what the process is, but what I do know right now is that almost a year and a half later, after the collection was halted due to this lawsuit, they're still not collecting revenue on this. Who knows what the timetable is that lies ahead, just based on the legality of it. Of course, we're not lawyers. We do know that there are differences between this measure and what we saw in San Francisco. So, we're not gonna sit here and act like we know the intricacies to know whether or not this is gonna fare better than what we saw in San Francisco or not.
And most people who write these measures, they know that there is, this has been challenged in San Francisco. This is where it failed, or this is what triggered that challenge, or, based on some of the proceedings that take place within the court system. So, they try to write around that, right? Like they try to take note of that before.
That's
they
the
put
benefit
something.
that they've had, which is
you
have the benefit of watching other, not necessarily, I think it's too early to say fail, but you're learning from the mistakes of people who have attempted to do something like this before. And of course you've seen places successfully implement this. So, that's a high bar when you have constitutional concerns at the federal government level and, of course, state law. So, what we're going to see there is to be determined. But let's get into the supporting arguments. Some of them you probably sniffed out already from the conversation that we've already had. But let's run through it just so we have it all clear, so that when you guys are making your decisions, you guys you have it. Of course, you can find similar information like this in your ballot, in your sample ballot, that their pamphlet that has your voter information. Another important thing too, because I never got one in the mail. I know some people have. I haven't gotten one. If you go online,
the voter information guide,
to get your voter information guide, you put in your address. It'll specialize it to where you are specifically. Always something good to keep in mind in case you don't keep it up. But if you do have that and you open it up, it's going to go something like this. The supporting arguments that you're hearing about it, I'll do supporting. I'll have you talk about the opposing arguments. Is first off, who is it going to impact? Shani Lo Rivera mentioned it too, is that the amount of San Diegans that this is really going to affect is going to be very small. Of course, you mentioned the amount of units that are being identified as potential for this tax. It's just over 5,000. So compare that to the amount of units that are available here in California. That is a small number. He says it is a small number of San Diegans. And you're looking at potential revenues of, on a conservative end, $9 million in the first year, and on a more optimistic end, $21 million. So when you look at, if you're just looking at the amount of revenue versus the amount of citizens that you can impact on it, they're saying the proof is in the pudding right there, that this should be a no-brainer. Additionally, they say that this is going to restore a, quote, more reasonable use of housing. That's according to Council Member Kent Lee. Of course, one of the things that we mentioned when it comes to the exemptions was, filling the vacancy. So they're trying to frame it as this isn't necessarily an indictment of people who own second homes, who own vacation rentals and whatnot, but we just want to see someone in them because of the housing challenges that we see here in San Diego and, of course, throughout California. And, of course, reducing vacancies in homes could help alleviate the ongoing housing crisis. When they mention what that money is actually going to do. While there's nothing specific in it, there have been the the people who have written this, it says that it could be used for anything. It's going into the general fund.
Yeah.
That means that could go towards housing. That also means that could go towards fixing some of the budget cuts that we've seen elsewhere. Of course, remember, we are going through intense budget negotiations right now. So some of the things that they talked about were the libraries, the parks, perhaps the arts, recreation. So the revenue is a carte blanche of whatever they wanted to fill. So that's something that they think could be important. However, some people say that in turn is a reason to oppose it, and I'll let you explain that and more.
Yeah, because again, what people don't like to hear when they talk about these tax revenue generators is it's sort of an open end or open to interpretation, right? Like a lot of voters love to know this is going to be taxed. I want to know where this is going. So that could be a bit of a hamstring issue, if you will. So now short-term vacation rentals aren't as luxurious as some people believe. This is the opposition, right? They're saying that this is work, that this is hard, and that this isn't necessary income sometimes. That sometimes people are breaking even some years, and that it's not fair to tax them as they are trying to stimulate the tourism and the economy with their side hustle, or maybe even their main hustle, if you will. Now, that is something that Councilmember Raul Campillo has been arguing against Measure A using. That, look, not everybody is this corporation or this foreign national who's just purchased up properties and is running like a monopoly board. Sometimes these are mom and pops who are trying to just do something with their second home, and they chose vacation rentals. It could ward off potential housing investment, that people feel like, hey, look, why am I going to come in, either try to manufacture some homes here in the city of San Diego if they're going to sit vacant potentially because this is a tough housing market? Am I now going to be hit with taxes and fees that I otherwise did not sort of look at? And the fact that funds are not required to go to X, which would be housing, because it's not going ahead to something specifically like housing or education or the arts, regardless of what it is that your choice is, they feel like this should have a direct link to something, and that because it doesn't, they simply just don't trust. Look, we've seen a fair share of criticism of something like the gas tax, which even does have an intended purpose of roads.
It is the only
of
source
roads
of
and bridges, but people point out, well, we're not seeing roads and bridges fixed, and that's a whole other issue. But then that turns into this like conspiracy theory of, well, it's not going to the roads and bridges, it's going to something else. Therefore, we're not in favor of something like the gas tax, though it has a noble intent, if you will, of trying to pay for the roads that you're using with your vehicle. And then, as we laid out before, there are constitutional concerns. Is this something that is constitutional? We've seen other vacancy taxes similar to this, like the one in San Francisco. It's being held up in court right now based on the basis of constitutionality. So again, those are the concerns, and I really am interested to see where something like this goes, because we just sort of got through this with, again, the Airbnb battle, if you will, and I'm not saying that this is so similar that again, but I do feel I'm hearing and seeing a lot of the same things that we saw 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
on both sides, yeah,
on both sides, and we don't necessarily want to, we're unbiased, and I don't want to make this sound like I'm sitting on the fence and like both have valid arguments, but this is a push and pull debate. There are interests on both sides that I think there's valid reasons on both sides, but I think when it really boils down to is that you're constantly seeing new ways to try to address this housing crisis, because it's something that has continued to not necessarily be solved. And until we start seeing some real fundamental changes to it, you're going to start seeing stuff like this. So whether or not this is something that is effective or something that is popular is, to be determined. Yeah,
and just to play devil's advocate, I it does feel like a little bit out of both ends, right? And maybe one day we can have the council member Shani La Rivera on this to sort of clear this up. But if the argument is that it's supposed to help with housing, but at the same time it's not impacting that many houses, and doesn't that sort of not help house, right? Like, because that's sort of the question that I'm coming through right now. If it's only 5,000 units, then, well, that's not going to really make a dent in the housing issue. But then at the same time, remember, these corporations or these foreign investors that were, again, sort of making to be this issue of the housing market, they could just pay the tax. And because you don't have that revenue dedicated to something as specific as housing, is this actually going to help with housing, which is what it is being advertised
Yeah.
as doing, is that this is going to be a tool in the toolbox to help combat the housing crisis. Well, again, I feel like I'm not intentionally poking holes as someone who is like an opponent. That I'm just saying, if I'm taking a step back, I don't think both those things can be true. That this doesn't impact a whole lot of houses, but it also is going to help, because not everyone is now going to all of a sudden put up their homes that they own or all these properties on the market. There's going to be, maybe, let's say, if we're being charitable, let's just say half of them now go on the market. We were talking about 25 houses. That's not going to flip the housing market by that much.
And you wonder, because, I'm not gonna. I don't have an economics degree, but one of the things that I think, that you hear about when it comes to housing is that a great way to bring down costs is to increase supply. Yeah. Of course, if this were to pass and if everything was going to go like the supporters assume they will, you are going to see an increase in vacancies, whether that is to rent or whether that is to own. It is getting, it's getting butts in houses, essentially. And if that's going to accomplish the goal, how much is 5,000 filled vacancies going to affect my average rent here in San Diego? If you're paying $1,200 a month here in San Diego, which I'm sure for some of you, you'd be stoked to do that, are you going to see it go to $1,150 because this happens? That's going to be the question that I think maybe a lot of people are wondering. I don't know if that's necessarily a fair question, because I think even people who support this argument would tell you that this is not supposed to be the end-all be-all of this debate. We are looking at multiple ways to address it.
Yes,
if I can do something to fill 5,000 units with this measure, we can pass a law. We can pass an ordinance here to bring it back down to, to open up another few thousand. If we can lobby to Sacramento to open up a bunch more and to build more, that I think is what they would argue is a job well done. So is this is, I'm going to make a weird analogy here, but it's like Kobe Bryant, the job's not finished. That's exactly how it is.
Yeah.
And that's what you would assume. That's what I'm assuming you would hear from them just based off of this. This is, poking holes. You're talking about potentially poking holes in that, not intentionally, but I think that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to poke holes into the fabric that got us into this mess.
Correct. Yeah. And look, we've seen an effort from the city of San Diego to increase the building. Now, there are two things. These are two separate numbers. I have the number of houses that have been permitted to be built, but again, as we know in California, that is not the same of houses that are built. So again, the city of San Diego has been trying to issue new permits for new properties to be built. We're going to get to the end of the segment here very quickly here, but it's been pretty much like an average between a little bit more than 8,700 to 9,200 per year during this 2-year surge between 2024 and 2025. So again, if those are the number of homes that have been permitted to be built, and we don't have all of those being built just yet, it takes time here in California. I think that's where I'm trying to say that 25, if being as conservative as possible, if 25 new homes go on the market, it is still not, it is a drop in the bucket. And that does not mean that we should not put water in the bucket. But I do just wonder if both those things can be true, where you're trying to quell concerns that it's really not going to impact that many people, but at the same time, this is beneficial for housing. And as you pointed out, I think it's a good argument to make that, look, anything at this point now is beneficial. So those are the things that voters have to weigh, right? Not everything is going to be a silver bullet. The term that gubernatorial candidate Tom Steyer uses, right? That there is no silver bullet. So I think also that's important to remember when we have these conversations, is that there isn't a simple fix for the issue that California is facing right now.
Yeah, well, we've given voters a lot of stuff to weigh. We want to give them a couple things they need to know, especially when it comes to voting. Of course, if you're voting by mail, ballot drop-off boxes are available. That's up until 8 p.m. on June 2nd. If you're doing this on June 2nd, make sure that this is postmarked no later than June 2nd. Make sure you are keeping that in mind, or else your ballot will not be counted. However, if you're doing in-person voting, you'll see some voting centers available on May 23rd. Those hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. All voting centers are going to be open starting May 30th. Again, that's 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And on Election Day, you will see, again, all of those voting centers, including the office for the Registrar of Voters, that will be open. The hours on Election Day are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So make sure you're keeping that information all in mind if this is something that you guys want to speak on here. Let's wrap it up there, Chris. I think that was a great conversation.